All right, so we get to the introduction of our speaker here. It's the 2024 Howard County Butterfly Survey result. It seems like just yesterday, because actually we kind of rolled his presentation into March, I think, this year, and it was he was in the paper in a special article in the banner. This is for the 7th year in a row. Kevin's going to update us on the status of butterflies in Howard County. He's the co-chair of the Howard County, Maryland Butterfly Survey. He's also past president of our club. And is encouraging the planting of native pollinator gardens as part of the Howard Bee City Pollinator Committee and the Habitat Creation and Enhancement and Pesticide Reduction Subcommittees. Take a breath. The way I met Kevin was when I got in the club, I filled out one of those surveys and I made the mistake of saying I was interested in counts, and I thought I was a participant, but a month later, I was the May count coordinator. The good news is Kevin develops incredibly detailed checklists. And when he was president, he did incredibly detailed checklists. And I guess that supremely qualifies him to be doing these surveys and keeping track of data. So no further ado, Kevin, let's hear about 2024.
Can't believe this is year 7. Wow. So I always start these talks with the thank you sheet because we can't be doing this without a ton of help. So first, a huge thank you to Kathy Litzinger, who basically, again, took a lead role in the data collection and organization, and that's a big job. So really appreciate her doing that. And of course, Bob Solom, who provides all the tools and to get the data from the email to the spreadsheet where it can be analyzed, and deals with the walk announcements, the photo gallery, the posted trip reports, and a host of other things, as usual. We did 6 butterfly walks this year. The leaders make the walks happen. Another big thank you goes to Kathy, Woody Merkel, Linda Hunt, and Chris Austin, who's co-led these walks and whose expertise made the walk special. And a thank you to everyone who sent in survey this past year. I think we had 58 people sending in surveys, and we had 23 of them that sent in more than 10. So that's a big deal. And a huge thank you goes to the 2 people who submitted more than 100 surveys, Linda Hunt at 156 and Kathy Litzinger at 139. And finally, everyone who sent in photos this year. I put out like 6 emails during the butterfly year, and I usually get 50 or 60 photos in the 4 or 5 weeks between emails. And it's a job just to figure out which ones to use. There's so many of them. So here we are at the results. We're in year 11 of the 5-year survey. So you can see over here what we did this year. We had 928 surveys. So we've had a couple years where we eclipsed 1,000, but we did really well this year as well. We had almost 45,000 minutes in the field, which is a lot. 70 species, which is not easy. It's pretty consistent, but there's a couple of them that we only have single butterfly, and that's true pretty much every year. And another 21,278 butterflies to add to the total. So we're now up to 236,000 butterflies that we've seen in 11 years. And our total number of species is 81 for the conglomerate 11 years. And if you look at the total number of minutes in the field, that's basically over 8,000 hours. It's 201, 40-hour work weeks, basically, or almost 4 years of working. So that's a lot of effort. So thank you to everybody who has participated in that. I'm not going to read this, obviously, but these are the 58 people that put in reports this year. I did it a little bit different this year than in previous years. Like last year, I said 111, but I added the people that were in the walks as well last year and decided not to do that this year. We had, I think, 160 people in the 6 walks. It's in one of the slides later on. So in terms of the number of surveys submitted, you can see Linda with 156 and Kathy with 139. And Clayton, who had major surgery last winter, was in 3rd with 91. So just amazing. And Jim Wilkinson and Janet Lydon, Jim McFadden. So you can see the ones that put in the most, but you know, there's a lot of people here that are putting surveys and really appreciate all of them for that. And basically the top 5 people submitted 50% of the surveys. So you can get a sense of that as well. So here's the numbers. The highest one is either sachem or cabbage white every year. Last 2 years it's been sachem. That 6,436 number is the highest number for a single species in a single year in the 11-year survey. And the second highest was sachem's last year that also exceeded 6,000. And cabbage white actually exceeded 6,000 a couple of years ago. But look at the cabbage white number. It's all the way down to 2333 from 6,000 a couple of years ago. So you get to see this kind of thing when you do a long-term survey. So we had 23 species between 100 and 1,000, and 4 had greater than 1,000. And the 6,336 sachems was greater than 62 species that we had by itself. So you can see on one of these charts coming up. I'll do a pie chart in a couple slides here. So here's the 26 species that had between 11 and 100. And you can just get a sense, and it's pretty consistent year to year. And then we had 19 species that had anywhere from 1 to 10, including Tawny Emperor and common wood nymph that had a single individual this year. Both of these were found by Annette as well. So if you look at the pie chart, the sachems, the cabbage white, and eastern tail blue, those 3 species accounted for more than half the butterflies that we saw for this year. And that's pretty consistent. And I'll show that again in another slide. So this is the 11-year survey wrap up as opposed to this one, which is the 2024 wrap up. So if you wrap up all, you know, for the 11 years, again, you have sachem, cabbage white, eastern tail blue, and tiger. It takes 4 species to cover half in the 11-year survey summary. But if you look over here, it's really consistent. You know, the first 7 are the first 7, both in 24 and for the 11-year survey. They're not necessarily in the same order, but they're close. And then, you know, 8, you know, the 8 of the top, or 9 of the top 10 are in both. The ones in red here are the ones that are, you can see they're a lot less in 2024 ranking compared to the 11-year survey ranking, which means that they're getting rarer as we go. So monarch is in that list, peck skipper, clouded sulfur, and then little glassy wing was the other way around. It's getting more common. So you get some kinds of data like this when you do a long-term survey. So I usually show this chart each year, and basically what it's saying is 61 and 81 species have been seen in all 11 years, and that's been consistent. The ones in green have been seen in 9 or 10 years of the 11, so you're likely to see those most years. The ones in purple have only been seen in 1 year out of the 11, so you're really unlikely to be seeing them in most years. So what really drives this number of what you get in a given year is how many of the orange ones you get primarily. So, and even, I mean, that's true to a point. Even with the 61 that we see every year, there's 8 of them that have less than 100 total individuals over 11 years. We've seen them every year, but there's 6 of those where we've only had a single individual in some of those years. So even they're not really guaranteed by any stretch. So the species with the highest annual count this year out of the 11, long-tailed skipper tied. We've had 4 several years with that one, but we tied it again. Common sooty wing, I have a different slide on that one, but you can see what a difference this is. We had 9 in 2014, but you know, it's been basically 2, 3, or 4 for the most part. And then this year we had 26, and I'll talk about that again later on. And again, we talked about sachem. So it's the highest for any species in any single year. A few more, another interesting story, and I'll have a slide on this one too. Dusted skipper was found for the first 5 years, and then not for the next 5. And Linda Hunt, who originally found it in 2014, kept going back year after year, even during these 5 years, hoping it would be there. And it paid off this year. It came back to the Murray Hill power line. Gray hair streak, again, a big jump from last 6 years. And the American lady, in the beginning of this year, American ladies are all common more in the spring and summer, and the painted ladies come midsummer into the fall. American ladies were everywhere in the spring and early summer. I mean, they were just about everybody who put in a report had American ladies on it, and it shows here. Pipeline swallowtail, these are the second highest count in 11 years. So pipeline swallowtail had 38, and many of those came from Barbara White's garden, of course. And then Red Admiral had a good year as well. And two more, Lilwood Satyr at 332 was the second highest, and Ocala Skipper. Look at the difference. The 2018 number of 224, and this is the second highest at 62. So what a big year 2018 was. Again, another advantage to doing a long-term survey. You get to see those peak years. So on the opposite end, the lowest count in 11 years. Southern Cloudy Wing, we had only 4. Again, that's one of the ones that's in the Murray Hill power line as well. That's the only place in the county it's been found. Peck Skipper, I'm starting to get really concerned with because it's just a dropping year to year. And again, you get to see that with a longer term survey. Zebra Swallowtail at 8, which is, again, its lowest. And some of this may be just not getting people out to the right habitat often enough, but it's still something to be concerned with. And then Swarthy Skipper with only 2. You can see the numbers. We had 12 in 2020, but other than that, 2, 3, 6, 3, and 2. So not many to speak of. And then a few more. Orange Sulfur is another one that is a lot lower than what it was for the first 5 years of the survey. It's consistently been low. Northern Pearly Eye, this one surprised me at 38. That's generally one that you see a lot more of. It's usually pretty common. Look at 2021 with 305. It's about 10% of that. And then Common Woodland, if we had a single one, that's one that I think we may lose at some point or at least miss in a given year. Normally when we find that, we find it at Mount Pleasant. And the second lowest count, 20 Edge Skipper is another one I'm worried about. You can see it dropping as well the last 3 years. Cabbage White, of all things, the second lowest count. It had 6,032 in 2021, and basically almost a little more than a third of that this year. And Clouded Sulfur at 245, and Banded Hair Streak. We couldn't buy a Banded Hair Streak this spring. We had 2 walks at Mount Pleasant that were supposed to find, were dedicated to find Coral Hair Streak and Banded Hair Streak in June, and we didn't find either on either walk. And again, White M Hair Streak, we had 2 peak years in 21 and 22, and back down to 3 in 24. Viceroy at 11, Meadow Fritillaria at 12. This is another one where maybe just not getting to the right habitat at the right time. And then Monarchs, and I'll have a slide on the Monarchs again. This is second lowest count in 11 years. So we are seeing what everybody else is seeing here. So I've been tracking early dates and late dates for the last few years, and we're seeing a lot of both, which to me is, basically indicative of climate change. We had 5, 6, 14 early dates this year. The latest early date was May 21st, so you can get a sense of that. But some of them were, by 2 weeks or more, like the Sleepy Orange, by 2 weeks or more. So just some really huge differences for new dates that you wouldn't expect. And in early dates, we had 8 of those, and those were all in November. In things like, let's see, the Little Glassy Wing. If you look at this one, I mean, it's a solid 4 weeks almost behind, later than the previous late date, which is kind of ridiculous. But so we're seeing some really interesting data there as well. So Mount Pleasant butterfly list. Last year we got number 68 was a zebra swallowtail, and I thought I have no idea what the next one's gonna be. Maybe it would be an Appalachian brown with um, work that they did creating the, wetland, on the Davis branch. And sure enough, Chris, who helps lead the butterfly walks, goes there early and walks around looking for, what she can find to help with the walk, and took this photo, of an Appalachian brown right there. We thought if it was gonna be anywhere, that's where it would be. It's number 69 now for out of the 81 in one location, which is pretty amazing. And I'm guessing the next one's going to be checkered white or little yellow, but checkered white we've seen in 2 years, and little yellow we've seen in 4. So that's a stretch for either one of those. It's just not the right habitat for many of the ones that are left, and most of those are ones we've only seen once or 1 year out of the 11. But pretty special place. Obviously, everybody pretty much in this room knows about Mount Pleasant. So Kathy Litzinger had a really interesting series here where she had a sleepy orange in her yard laying eggs, and she went out, just to photograph the egg, and she actually watched the caterpillar hatch from the egg. I mean, what are the chances of that? And this is it. So just amazing. Unfortunately, she didn't have it on video, but how cool would that have been? But then, she followed it until it formed a chrysalis, and here it is coming out. So pretty amazing set of shots from Kathy. Common sooty wing I talked about earlier. We had 40 common sooty wings in the first 10 years of the survey, so an average of 4 per year. It was the lowest total of any species that we'd seen all 10 years. And you can see I pointed out earlier, you can see the max was 9 in 2014. And Annette and Kathy found 26 of them at Little Portion Farm, which just blew us all away. We usually find them in Elkhorn garden plots in 1s or 2s. And that had 10 on July 26th. And that report alone, that single day report alone, was exceeded any previous year's worth of sooty wings that we had during the survey. So, the one question for me at least is how many other pockets of diversity are around in the county that we haven't found yet? So a lot of what I'm going to try to do this year is start looking for habitat in addition to the butterflies and just seeing what else is out there. We've actually found pockets of diversity for the common sooty wing, broadwing skipper, American copper, silvery checker spot, at least to name a few of them. So eastern pine elfin, it's a butterfly of low detectability. It's a Dave Zilkowski, term. A total of 16 were reported in 6 of the first 7 years and hadn't been seen since 2020. And Annette was determined to find one this year, and she went out to Trinity Cemetery 6 times before finding 2 of them on nectarine on pussy toes on April 14th. And sometimes that's what it takes. It's just being that persistent. They're usually out from early April to late May. So our goals really for this one, we pretty much just go to Trinity Cemetery. They're so hard to find. That's the only place we've consistently found them, and consistent is in quotes because it's not really that consistent. But what a gorgeous butterfly this is. I talked about American Lady. I'm going to go a little more detail here. We knew early on that this was going to be a banner year for them. In 2023, we had 23 total, and we exceeded that by the end of April this year. And we surpassed the peak count of 76 on July 19th. And we hit triple digits for the first time with the species. Sue Muller reported one on April 9th, which was a new early date, and Annette had one on November 11th, which was a new late date. So this is one ovipositing on pussy toes at Trinity Cemetery when I was out looking for eastern pine elfins. So we had a few that I talked about the last couple of years that I was concerned about, and Great Spangled was a big one. You can see, the 176, 168, 147 numbers in 2015, 17, 18 dropped dramatically to, between 20 and 45. This year we had 71, which was a bit of a bounce back. Most of them are found in Schooling Mill Park. For some reason, that habitat seems to be holding a little bit. And it's not one that a lot of people go to, so we could up the numbers if people consistently went there. And this year, we ended up with 71 of them, so that's a good thing. American Copper is another one. And basically, we had 42 this year, and all of them were found by Linda Hunt. I think there was one, actually, that's not true. One was found by Julie, oh, come on. I'll think of it in a minute. Julie's probably listening and saying, what's he doing? Anyway, we had 42 or 41 out of 42 were found by Linda. Common checkered skipper is another one that I was concerned about. You can see the drop down here. We got as low as 14 in 2022, back up to 86. Again, a lot of these were at Little Portion Farm that Net found and has been looking extensively at. And all of these bounce back species, the common attribute is that they were mostly found at a single location, and we need to find multiple locations for them. So monarch status. In the 1980s, there were over 4.5 million Western monarchs that flocked to overwintering grounds in coastal California. In the mid-90s, an estimated 380 million Eastern monarchs made the journey to their overwintering grounds in Mexico. So about 90% of the monarchs are in the East. Since then, the Western population has shrunk by more than 95%, and the Eastern population by 80%. By 2080, the Western population has a greater than 99% probability of extinction, and the Eastern population has a 56 to 74% probability of extinction. The International Union for Conservation of Nature has labeled the monarch as vulnerable. They actually changed that. They made it less of a worry than what it was. But the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is now seeking public input on the proposal that the monarch should be listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. They're in the process of gathering input in that at this point. So during our survey, we peaked at 1937 in 2018, but you can see it was hanging in there in the 800s from 2020 through 22. But the last 2 years, it's been down to like 30% of what it was. So we're seeing the same sort of problem with monarchs as well. So going through some interesting observations, Bonnie Hott found a clouded sulfur on March 13th, a full 15 days of its previous early date. And it's possible, maybe even probable, that this one overwintered as an adult. They usually overwinter, I think, in the caterpillar stage. And at that early stage in the spring, it'd be really hard to believe that the caterpillar would form a chrysalis and come out by mid-March. Annette found a winter form sleepy orange on March 14th, 3 weeks earlier than the previous early date, which was last year when Clayton found one. That one almost definitely overwintered. It had the winter form. So I think we can pretty much say that sleepy oranges will sometimes overwinter in the county. Annette also found a harvester on May 2nd, 20 days ahead of the previous early date. Bill Hill found a Zabulon skipper on April 23rd, and Annette found a sachem on April 30th. And these are the first reports of grass skippers before May 1st on the survey. May 1st was always the quick date for grass skippers. Annette photographed a cloudless sulfur caterpillar on May 30th, and the early date for this species is May 29th. So if you have a caterpillar, it had to be there a week or two in advance of that. So there was an early date that we didn't catch, but and we had a single common wood nymph found by Annette. That brings the 11-year total for this species to 53 individuals, and it now holds the distinction of having the lowest number for any species that's been found for all 11 years in the survey. And according to literature, black swallowtails use asparagus as a host plant, and Annette confirmed that on May 22nd with this photo. Pipeline swallowtails are doing well in Barbara White's garden. She had reported 22 of the 38, which has been pretty typical. Barbara's had about 70% of the pipelines that we've seen in the 11 years. Kathy Litzinger also had 11 of them this year, including one on April 16th, which is a new early date by 13 days. So between the two of them, they had 33 of the 38 pipelines for the year. Annette photographed a pair of fiery skippers mating on October 6th, which, you know, seems pretty late, but fiery skippers are migrants. They can't survive the winter here. So what are they doing mating, you know, in October? So, you know, the question was, would the female fly south to lay her eggs? So Annette asked Harry Pavel on that. And his answer is, the sad thing that many of these seasonal migrants continue to move north, even breeding, and then perish with the first hard freeze. Odd that they don't know to head south. Cloudless sulfurs are a great example. Some nephalids, like painted ladies, commas, buckeyes, have a minor or partial southward movement in the fall, but their movements have never been documented like monarchs. Nature can be cruel at times. So just an interesting observation here. So, interesting observation, slide 3. Jack Litzinger found a little wood satyr in Jack and Kathy's yard on June 13th. It was the 54th species found in their yard. And I'm pretty sure that Kathy found the other 53. On September 12th, Jim Wilkinson found an aberrant common buckeye that I talked about. This is so red. It looks like a mangrove buckeye, which is only in the very southern tip of Florida, but it's scary how close it looks to it. I mean, it's probably just an, you know, aberrant common buckeye, but it makes you think about it when you see something like this. Silvery checker spots continue at Ilchester Elementary School. A total of 138 were reported. And you remember the year a few years ago that we had 32, and we called it the butterfly of the year because we were so excited that we found 32 of them. A total of 223 gray hair streaks were reported this year. Of those, 70 were reported at St. Anthony's Shrine, which is a real hot spot for us these days, including 21 on August 12th.
Where is that?
That's,
Where is that?
you know where the Franciscan Friary is?
Yeah.
It's there, basically, yeah. And they're actually happy with us coming out because they want to know what's being seen on their grounds, so. On August 12th, Kathy found a Joro spider. Where's the photo? There's the photo of this one. Here we go. St. Anthony's Shrine, Little Portion Farm has made a big difference in several species annual counts, including common sooty wing, common checkered skipper, and gray hair streak. And it's where the single Tawny Emperor was found this year as well. So I looked at the sachem distributions because they had over 6,000 for the last 2 years, and it was pretty interesting. If you plot it by month, the blue is 2023 and the red is 2024. Look how the blue stayed relatively low in July and August, and then just blew up in September. Almost 4,000 of them in that month. Where this year, where we had a few, you know, a couple hundred more than last year, but still, you know, just over 6,000, it ramped up a lot, you know, slower. So, you know, 1492, 1906, it didn't peak as much, but the 2 previous months peaked a lot more. So just interesting looking at it. So you wonder what caused that. But anyway, with this kind of data, you can look at things like this. So as I said earlier, we had 6 butterfly walks between June 25th and September 1st. 5 were at Mount Pleasant. The 6th was at Elkhorn. We actually canceled one because the weather was too hot. We had a total of 165 people attending. The June 25th walk had the most at 35. We averaged 19 species each, or average was 19 species. The max number was 25 on August 10th. Each walk had 4 or 5 leaders. And we plan to have a similar number of walks this year as well. Here's a group photo from the July 23rd walk. And one interesting thing, when one of the butterflies you like to show off if you can find it is a hackberry emperor. And I'm walking around the community garden and one lands on my hand. So I just got to walk it around and show everybody a hackberry emperor. I think we found like 3 this year total, so this was one of the 3, but the timing was really good. So the first butterfly of the year, I do this every year. It was an eastern comma. It was found by Cheryl Forrest on February 9th at MPEA. So it's the third earliest butterfly seen in the 11 years. You can see the, the dates along here and the years along here, and it's color coded by species. So blue is morning cloak, green is comma. We had a single variegated fritillary back in 2020, and then we had question mark and eastern comma on the first day in 2014, 2014. So you just get a sense of the distribution. We always see the first butterfly before mid-March. And what this doesn't say is that in January 12th of 2020, Bonnie Ott found an angle wing. It wouldn't cooperate to tell whether it was a question mark or a comma. But think about that. That's 3 days from now in terms of calendar wise. Don't think that's going to happen this year.
They have the winter, don't
They do over winter, yeah. So the last butterfly of the year contest, the rules must be, it has to be in Howard County, you have to submit a photo and a report, and it can't be one of the people involved in the survey. And Terry won it this year. She found a common buckeye at Belmont on November 27th, and she got her copy of the butterflies of the Mid-Atlantic. So I thought about the date of the last butterfly sighting. I'd never plotted it up until this year, and that's pretty interesting as well. Back in 2014, it was November 4th, but I'm not sure we were actually doing the November, December data back then. We started doing that a year or two later. But we've had it as late as December 27th, and that one we actually had both a common sulfur and an orange sulfur that day. But you can see, they're basically mostly in late November, and there's a couple in December and a few in early November, early on. But the interesting part about this was I would thought there would be like 1 or 2 species that would be the ones that you would typically see late. No, there's 12. So we've had cabbage white, orange sulfur, clouded sulfur, cloudless sulfur, sleepy orange, eastern tail blue, variegated fritillary, pearl crescent, eastern comma, painted lady, common buckeye, and monarch as the last butterfly of the year. So that one surprised me. So every year I put out photos from participants, and like I said, we've gotten a lot of them, and I really appreciate it. We got a recently closed monarch from Andrea Cochran, broadwing skipper from Annette, and a long-tailed skipper. Heather Richardson had a red banded hair streak. Question mark by Clayton, and Annette's coral hair streak, and southern cloudy wing by Linda. That's one that had its lowest count for the 11-year survey this year, so that was a big deal. This was the same hackberry emperor that landed on my hand before it landed on my hand. Zebulon skipper that Bill Hill found in April. Appalachian brown that Annette had in her backyard. So I can go on. There's a chrysalis from Heather Hogard, and juniper hair streak from Annette, and of course the Harsis dusky wing May from Annette. The harvester, great shot of a harvester from Bonnie. One of the few banded hair streaks we saw from Annette. Lee Skipper from Clayton. I like this shot because it shows the aircraft formation of its wings with the hind wings up 45 degrees. Eastern comma from Annette and a white M from Linda. And then these two I wanted to point out. Kelsey is a great photographer, and she had 2 that look artistic. I mean, they're just gorgeous shots. She had a common checkered skipper and a monarch that she took on walks. I needed to include this in this talk. They're just gorgeous shots. So every year we do a butterfly of the year, and the dusted skipper was a no-brainer for this one. It had not been seen in the county for 20 years prior to the survey. And it was found in 3 locations on the Western Shore, in Patuxent Wildlife Research Center, Soldier's Delight, and on a single hill in the Murray Hill power line. And Linda initially found this species in 2014 and just blew Dick Smith away with this one. And we saw it in each of the first 5 years, 2014 through 2018, only in that one location. But we went there every year at the right time. And then the county dumped dredge from the lakes next to the hill, and we didn't see the butterflies for the next 5 years. And Linda kept going back. Her persistence, you know, she's from New England, she's persistent. And she kept going back, and her persistence paid off this year. They were back this year. So we found 7 of them, which actually matched the peak for, that we had in 2017. I'm guessing that they're actually found on 2 hills in the Murray Hill power line. The one across the river is it has a fence around it, it's private land. And it's probably very similar habitat to the one we seen them on, so I'm guessing that's what happened. And they finally moved back after 5 years. But no brainer for this one, this is a big deal. So I'm gonna, you know, I do this every year. I show all the things that we've created that are on the website. So Dick Smith's Butterflies of Howard County, the cheat sheet, the butterfly flight times graphs, the early and late dates, the overwintering strategies, the annual butterfly year presentation I'm doing now, and then going off into the pollinator garden design templates and spreadsheet, the butterfly photo gallery that Bob does, the walks, the annual reports, the last butterfly of the year contest. I do the 6 emails every year, so the butterfly year status emails, the talks, the ID emails, and recognizing the first and last butterfly of the year. And the ones in blue are on the website, and many of those are PDFs, so you can download them to your phone and use them in the field. So I'm going to move over a little bit to, and I do this every year as well. The ones in blue I'm going to talk about, try to be pretty brief. But the 16-step process to cure nature deficit disorder. And it's, you know, I'm also on this Bee City committee. That's from the Xerces Society. It's, you know, a Howard County committee basically. The goal is to get people to plant native pollinator gardens and landscape for caterpillars. So, you know, the 16 steps are: plant a native pollinator garden, use straight natives instead of cultivars or hybrids, use local ecotype native plants, landscape for caterpillars, use as many keystone trees, shrubs, and perennials as you can find. Support native plant nurseries, remove invasive species, minimize the number of non-native plants, reduce the size of your lawn, leave the leaves, wait until spring to clean up the garden, turn off the lights at night, reduce or eliminate insecticide use, reduce or eliminate mosquito spraying, and provide nest sites for bees and just spread the word. So I used this one last year, but I think it's important, so I'm going to repeat it. So plants lace their leaves with nasty tasting or toxic chemicals to keep herbivores from eating them. They don't want to be eaten. And insects that eat these plants have to adapt to the chemical defenses. So the plant then adapts to the insect adaptation in a reciprocal evolution. Of the 6,752 species of butterflies and moths in North America with confirmed host records, 86% of them combine their larval development of plants within only 3 families out of the 268 plant families in North America. So what that's saying is they're not only unable to eat almost all of the non-native plants, but also most of the native plants. And this is called host plant specialization, and many native solitary bees are pollen specialists requiring a specific plant as well. So a study compared caterpillar numbers of 4 non-native invasive sites with 4 native sites of similar size. The results were the non-native plots had 68% fewer caterpillar species, 91% fewer caterpillars, and 96% less caterpillar biomass than the native sites. In other words, 91% less butterflies and moths and 96% less food available for birds. 96% of our birds raise their young on insects. It takes from 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars to raise a single brood of chickadees. And a 2018 Smithsonian study concluded that in areas made up of less than 70% native plant biomass, Carolina chickadees will not produce enough young to sustain their populations. A 70% or higher, birds can thrive. And a Mount Cuba study conducted a survey of 14 local nurseries in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Maryland, Virginia to determine what percentage of plant taxa are sold by the local nurseries are native. And the results were 75% of them were non-native, 19.3% were cultivars or hybrids, only 5.7% straight natives, and 2% of them were invasives, and another 2% were on the invasive watch list. So that's what we're up against. And this is a photo of obviously a chickadee with a caterpillar, but This is New England Aster Purple Dome, which I had in my garden. It's a gorgeous plant. It turns out it's actually a cultivar, but it was found in nature. It wasn't cultivated for that. But that doesn't make it, a really good pollinator plant. I didn't see anything on it, so I gave away. So we have we still have the spreadsheet up on the website for helping to plan a pollinator garden. You can actually use it to sort for what your needs are. The best native nectar plants for butterflies, for me at least, Joe Pyeweed, bee balm, asters, goldenrods, common swamp and butterfly milkweed, purple coneflower, gay feather, boneset, thoroughwort, Nervine, wheatfield thistle, and buttonbush. I have many of those in my garden at this point. I have over 300 native plants in my garden at this point. So a couple, exciting things. There's a couple local nurseries, Howard EcoWorks, that only sell straight natives. Also Chesapeake Natives in PG County, Seven Bends Nursery in Berryville, Virginia, and Ursanga in Springfield, Virginia. Seven Bends actually came to the Robinson Nature Center plant sale in September. So you can actually get plants from them at some of the plant sales. And what's really exciting is there's an outfit in Minnesota called Prairie Moon that sells basically a 38 plant set of starter gardens, basically for sunny, dry, sunny, moist, shady, wet, different things. And it means that if anybody wanted to start a native plant garden, they wouldn't have to do all the research. It's already there. It's, and they give you a layout for where to plant them so you get the spread correct. The problem is they're not local, so they don't have the local ecotype. So we've been waiting for a nursery to come up that will actually do that locally. And a place called Ecoplantia in Frederick now is doing that. So there is someone local doing local ecotypes that has a ready-made pollinator garden for different conditions that you can purchase. And it's online, so they deliver it to you. My Home Park is doing the same thing, and they're now local as well. And really exciting is that Lawrence Garden Service and Howard EcoWorks are trying to start doing that as well. We'll see how that works out. But we've had meetings with them from the Bee City Committee, and they're starting to pick out which plants they're going to use, and they're going to have several different, types for different habitat needs. So I showed this last year again, and just an update. It's okay to use non-native annuals in your yard, but you want to keep your natives 70-30 or 80-20 if you can do it. Zinnias are obviously something that's going to bring them in. They need nectar and pollen, so they don't necessarily care whether it's native or not. Some of the bees do because they have specific pollen plants that they go for, but for nectar, they generally will use annuals pretty well. Zinnia, lantana, Mexican sunflowers, fall verbena, cosmos all worked really well. I'd say salvia and angelonian maybe not quite as well for us last year. We tried all of these. It's worth putting some in your garden as long as you don't overdo it. Again, here's the table of the keystone trees and shrubs from Doug Townley. And again, if you look at, for the best caterpillar host plants are almost all trees. The 20th best tree is 125 different species of butterflies and moths, caterpillars. And the best herbaceous plant is goldenrod, which is 115. So if you want to plant anything, plant an oak tree. 534 species of butterfly and moth caterpillars. And read these books if you can. Anything by Doug Townley. So I want to get into this one. We have a little more information than we had last year. So mosquito spray and insecticide usage, particularly mosquito spray. They use pyrethroids to kill mosquitoes, and they kill everything. They don't just kill mosquitoes. Fireflies, butterflies, bees, beetles, true bugs, moths, dragonflies. We had a state rare northern oak hair streak last year that was found for the first time in the survey. And there, two of them were found. The second one was found deceased right after they had sprayed for insects right around their house. So synthetic pyrethroids are similar to naturally occurring substances, which is Mosquito Joe tells you it's natural. It's not. It's more toxic. It lasts longer in the environment, and they typically respray every 21 days. And the bottom line is mosquito fogging just doesn't work. And this is from Doug Tallamy. In order to control mosquitoes in the adult stage, you have to kill 90% of them. And studies are showing that Mosquito Joe kills 10% of them, which is why he has to keep coming back. And it's quite expensive compared to the alternative. So it's better to control mosquitoes in the larval stage using the bucket of doom, which is get a bucket, fill it with water, put in straw or hay, let it ferment for a day or two. And the diatoms and algae that mosquito larvae like to eat are blossoming in the bucket. As the straw ferments, it releases carbon dioxide, which attracts female mosquitoes to lay their eggs. And then you add mosquito dung, which is a natural bacterium that kills the aquatic diphtheria. And the only aquatic diphtheria in the bucket is a mosquito. It's Bacillus thuringiensis. I'm sure I'm posing that one up pretty badly. It's very targeted. You're not killing any other insects. So what you do is you get a 3 to 5 gallon bucket. You can use green if you want to camouflage it. You need mosquito dung, straw, and maybe plastic wire or zip ties. You fill your bucket halfway, you add straw, and as it begins to ferment, it produces carbon dioxide. You add mosquito dung, you need to add one every 30 days. While the dunks are safe for insects and animals, you can cover your buckets with plastic wire or similar screens to keep curious animals out. And place your buckets in areas of the yard where mosquitoes are likely to hang out, ideally in a shaded area. And you don't need to change your water in a bucket. If the water evaporates below the halfway mark, you can add more water to it. But the really exciting thing is Susan Tucker put 5 of them in her yard last year and she had no mosquitoes. So it actually worked. So this is it. Embrace the wild in your garden. And thanks. So, any questions?
Where's Trinity Cemetery?
It's, you know where the bald eagle nest is in Maryland Central Farm?
Yeah.
It's right behind it. So
Is it part of the?
yeah, you have to go down to the circle and make a right. It's the friary basically.
Part of the Friary.
Yeah, it's part of the friary, yeah. It's basically it's a community garden. It's on the friary grounds.
Oh, okay.
Is what it is. So, and we're gonna be looking for other areas like that. I just talked to Terry and we're gonna go to what, 3 or 4 places, Terry, that you pointed out this year and just try to see if there's other hot habitat places. So one thing that Greg talked about is we could use some help with this. If you look at the number of reports that are coming in, they're dominated by half a dozen people. There were 23 people that put in 10, but Linda and Kathy and Jim Wilkinson and Annette, are putting in dozens, and that's where many of the sightings are coming from. And we need a few more crazy people like them to go out in the field and look for these things. And we need to figure out how to train people up to understand what they're seeing. And we welcome people taking photos of butterflies and sending them to us, and we can ID them for you. But if you're interested, pop me an email. We have at least 3 people on the list now that are interested that we're going to try to work with. And we're going to try to do, if we get enough people, we may do targeted walks for specific species like falcate orange tip or things like that may only be out for a couple weeks in the year, and maybe try to get some more interest that way as well. So, I mean, the people that are the real key contributors are getting really old like me. So we need some young blood in here. So
how do you account for double counting? In other words, if somebody goes out on Monday and sees a butterfly, how do you know it's not the same butterfly 3 days later?
Good question. So that really is important for the rarities more than the common butterflies, because I mean, let's face it, we're seeing a small percentage of the total number of butterflies in the county. But a few years ago, we had Annette went out and found 10 coral hair streaks in Mount Pleasant. And I went out the next day and found 9. And Kathy Lissinger found it the next day and found 8. And at that point, we decided we need to keep this at 10. Because we're probably seeing the same ones. So it depends, really. We try to be smart about that. And if they're rare and they're in the exact same locations with the same hill. So we limit it to the max. And we do the same thing in gardens. Like Kathy has had broadwing skippers in her garden every year. And she was putting in one every day. And it was probably the same broadwing skipper she was seeing. So we said, just put in, reports weekly from your local garden and pick out the maximum number you see in any given day when you send it in. So I mean, it's not a perfect system, but that's our attempt at dealing with that. Yes.
Yeah, you talked about the variability of the counts based on the level of effort going to different places. And it seems like that would create year-to-year variability. Any thoughts about how you might standardize the counts?
Yeah. I have no idea how to do that properly. Do you do it by the number of reports or the number of minutes or things like that? And just not willing to get into that. Just straight report what we see, and otherwise, there'll be questions about that as well. So, yeah.
Well, thank you. Would you back up the slide? I want to see what you were saying about to avoid double counting the butterflies in the yard or whatever. Not the butterfly. Go back a slide.
Go back a slide.
One more. No. Go the other direction. You had the number where you were talking about the slide where you had the number of
Let's see.
No, toward the end. At the end, not the
Yeah,
end.
I don't remember doing anything about double counting.
No, I'm saying for my purpose of thinking about how it was a way to avoid double counting.
Okay.
I need to see the slide again.
Not sure which one, but
Just second to the last one. Oh, well. Yeah, I don't know where it is.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, there was one in the back, I thought.
I was just gonna ask, are you free for a phone conversation tomorrow? My mind is churning. I've got some ideas.
She's got spare time too to do.
Yeah,
butterfly survey.
I know, I'm working on her. I think we do. I'm not sure.
Saturday,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay,
I've got some ideas.
okay, sounds good.
That's search director.
Yeah, exactly. All right, thank you.
Kevin. All right, so Kevin's already got a coin, so the best I can do is some of Shirley's famous bourbon balls and some fresh party mix from the last holiday season here. Thank you very much. So a few footnotes for you since we got a little bit of time. One of the reminders I forgot to tell you was, if you like this cool shirt that has our butterfly logo from the club, you can order those off of the site. Don't try to order them tonight because I found out the site was closed for upkeep today, but it should be reopened tomorrow. You can get these and other logoed items for the club. These city signs, you know where to get those? Anybody know? Where? Right here and at Howard County Conservancy. So once you fill out your paperwork, you can get one of those signs here. Doesn't cost you a thing. You just plant the heck out of your garden with natives. Some places do sell natives, but then they were labeled specifically like Sun Nurseries, but you gotta look at the signs are like green signs. Why does Little Portions do so well? Well, the deal is they've got strips of natives planted throughout their garden where they're doing produce, and that's why it's such a great place. And they welcome us, as Kevin said, for pictures of butterflies, plants, and birds, because they'll use them on their sites. It's a lady named Kim Camastro that had me come out, and Brian, who runs it, I forget his last name. Also, if you have good pictures at Howard County Conservancy, since we're on that subject, there's a lady named Sue Hobby that would love to have your pictures taken of birds at Howard County Conservancy. Another note on Kevin's talk, the public garden wanted to use his list off our site to put it in the annex. They still have it, but they could, based on the way it was constructed,